Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is the Chico Bormann Show here on the Big Play Sports Network. Always great to have you along. I'm Mike Chico Bormann, Michael Bohm producing. We're going to be visiting with Mitch Lawrence today, longtime NBA columnist, and of course now with SiriusXM NBA Radio. We're to the Eastern Finals. Game one was last night. Incredible. Wow, Indiana, talking about a gut punch. How do they respond to that after being up in that game, seemingly having that game against Boston and losing it? Western Conference Finals begins tonight, and Mitch is joining us from Dallas coming up in a bit, and I know he's going to have a lot to say about JB Bickerstaff. We'll have plenty about JB, his future. Should it be here? Should it not be here? If he does get fired, who are some names? We'll pose that to Mitch Lawrence, because we keep hearing about, well, there's nobody that you can hire. I find that very hard to believe. I always say if the front office can't identify somebody to replace somebody, then the front office probably needs to replace themselves. So we'll see. Of course, you got the lingering Donovan Mitchell questions, all of that stuff. We'll see about that as well. All right, full disclosure, I'm struggling a little bit. So it's allergy season. Nobody feels sorry for me at all. I'm fine. But allergy season, upper respiratory converge. Every time I go to laugh or cough or anything, I'm going to wipe this microphone down, by the way, Fontana. But every time I do that, I sound like I'm a 2-pack a day or 2-box a day or 2-pack a day, whatever it is, cigarette smoker. Now, I like an occasional cigar, but I apologize. So we got, again, plenty of hoops to get to. Guardians on fire, going for 6 in a row. And the Browns and OTAs, Deshaun Watson, I ain't going to throw for the media. I did throw yesterday. We hear he's doing okay, but we'll believe it when we see it. But according to Deshaun, that's probably not, we're not going to be able to see it in full until training camp. So much ado about nothing. Yeah, kind of. All right, we got a lot to get to. Mitch Lawrence talking hoops, Western Conference Finals, Eastern Conference Finals. Most importantly, your Cavaliers. JB Bickerstaff, in, out. What's the future look like? Donovan, in, out. We find out next. Chico Bormann Show here on the Big Play Sports Network. All righty, welcome in another edition of the Chico Bormann Show right here on the Big Play Sports Network. So great to have you along. Michael Bohm is producing. I'm Mike Chico Bormann. And, of course, today, a lot of hoops to be talked about. We had a crazy, crazy Game 1 start of the Eastern Conference Finals last night. Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals in the NBA tonight. Who better to join us to talk about that and everything NBA, including your Cleveland Cavaliers? And JB is in or out, or what's the deal? He's Mitch Lawrence, longtime NBA columnist, now with SiriusXM NBA Radio. And he actually joins us right now from what I would term it like a hotbed right now for sports. You got the Mavericks, I know they're equally, well, maybe not equally. You tell me, are they equally as pumped for the Dallas Stars in the NHL as they are for the Mavericks and hoops?
Well, first of all, the big story down here is the Cowboys started the OTAs.
Of course it is.
And Micah Parsons is now doing like boxing stuff to get himself ready. That's overshadowing everything, because the Cowboys, after another epic playoff collapse,
the star,
that's what people care about.
The star.
But really, no, the Mavericks are bigger than the Stars, I think, in the area. And, of course, one of the reasons is because they have guys like Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, and Jason Kidd is the coach. And by the way, the Mavericks, and I started to cover the team in their 7th year back in 1987. So they don't have a long history. It only goes back to about 1980, Chico. Jason Kidd's the first coach in the history of the Mavericks, with Dick Motta, with Don Nelson, with John McLeod, with Avery Johnson, with Rick Carlisle. He's the first Maverick coach to go to 2 Western Conference Finals.
Wow.
And you know what? Last year,
Write that down.
he doesn't get a lot. It's amazing. The guy helped the Mavericks win their only championship in 2011, and people kill him like he had nothing to do with the Mavericks ever winning. And he's one of the all-time great players in the history of the league. And it's like finally, people are reluctantly saying, "Hey, yeah, you know, man, he's pretty good. He's got him to two." I mean, guys, what do you? So anyway. So, and I'm not kidding about the Cowboys. You know how big a story they are.
Oh,
it's the Rangers, the defending champions of the baseball, who nobody's talking about because they have not gotten off to a great start and they don't look like world champions this year. But the Mavericks certainly are in play here, and they're going to have a big they're going to have a big showing against Minnesota. We'll see what they do.
Well, let me just say, and I know obviously we're to the conference finals, so at this point, yeah, I think everybody's excited. If you're watching hoops, you're excited to watch each series. But this one, because let me ask you this first and foremost before we get to Dallas, are you surprised? Like, did you think even at the beginning of the postseason, did you think Minnesota had this in them to get to the Western Conference Finals and possibly even the NBA Finals?
Well, when the brackets came out, the seedings, I thought Minnesota would not. I didn't think they would beat the Denver Nuggets. I thought Denver was going to repeat. That's how wrong I was. Minnesota's defense in that series, the way that they imposed their will on Jokic and Murray, the way that they won road games, the way that they won a historic Game 7 after being down 20. No, I didn't see that coming, and I'm sure nobody in Minnesota saw that coming. So it's been a great story. They got past, for them, Denver was the team that, last couple of years, they were sent home against in the playoffs. So for them to overcome that hurdle, we've seen it in the NBA over the years. Sometimes you have a one team that, hey, LeBron James, before he went to Miami, what was he always complaining about? We can't get past the Celtics. That's one of the reasons he left, right? Because he needed to find a place where he could get people to help get past the Celtics. Well, finally, Minnesota got past Denver. I didn't expect it. And that's why when they did that, they, to me, became the automatic favorite to win it all. I put them past Dallas. I put them past Boston. I put them past Indiana in this NBA Final Four. So it's been a tremendous story for a franchise that, let's face it, I mean, they've had no history of winning other than that 1 year with Kevin Garnett in 2004 when they went to the conference finals. Didn't have a chance against who was it, the Lakers.
Yeah. And, to continue with that, that series against the Nuggets, you go back to that Game 7. I mean, Mitch, if you're telling me or anybody at this point, Denver's up 20, Anthony Edwards isn't going to play his best basketball, right. And yet they're still going to win. I mean, that to me is the scary thing, is that their best player, one of the best in the league, didn't even necessarily, quote unquote, do his part. And they came all the way back to beat them. I mean, that's amazing.
To beat Denver, and it's a very difficult place to play, not just because of the altitude, because they're playing against Jokic and Murray, and to basically shut down Denver, who got no offense. Their big stars ran out of gas, and that's on Mike Malone, by the way. When you're up 20, you got to find a way to get Jokic and Murray some breaks so that if Minnesota makes a run at you late, those guys will have something in the tank. They had nothing in the tank, and you saw what happened with Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon and KCP. Those guys didn't give them anything. And, of course, one of the big things going into this year was we knew Denver's big Achilles heel was, or one of, let's say, the Achilles heel for them, not the starting five, but their bench. Losing Bruce Brown to free agency, losing Jeff Green to free agency. You're only going to play 7-8 guys in the playoffs. But losing those guys and not replacing them with veteran scorers. So they had to depend on, Christian Brown, and they had other guys who were just like no factors. That killed them too. But as Mike Malone said, we can't score against Minnesota. And that's the thing. You can play great defense in the playoffs, but in this day and age and in any time, you have to be able to fourth quarter, come up with baskets, come up with extra possessions with offensive rebounds. And you saw it down the stretch of Game 7. It was one shot and out, usually jumpers that didn't hit for Denver. Minnesota overtook them. You're right. it's a very big confidence booster. They were able to win like that game without a monster game from their top player, Anthony Edwards, but they got major contributions from a lot of guys. So I think that speaks very well. Confidence-wise, when you win a game like that on the road against the defending champs, you should be flying into the next round. There should be no drop-off. You should be hammering Dallas here in the first 2 home games.
Okay. Mitch Lawrence joining us again from Dallas, longtime NBA beat reporter, and now on SiriusXM NBA Radio, joining us. Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals tonight between the Dallas Mavericks and the I just had a brain fart.
Minnesota Timberwolves.
Dallas Mavericks and the Minnesota Timberwolves. My goodness.
Yeah, well, we're not used to saying it, right?
No, I know it does. Minnesota just doesn't roll off the tongue.
No.
As far as Dallas is concerned, though, as we shift to the Mavericks now, you talk about Minnesota's defense. You've got to be able to score points. Well, you got Luka Doncic, who is as capable of as anyone. Kyrie Irving, I always said this, even in his days in Cleveland, even as much as he drove me and a lot of people crazy, he is one of the most talented offensive basketball players I've ever seen. Ball handling, shooting, all of it. It feels like, okay, Minnesota should be favored, but it also feels like, hey, the Dallas Mavericks, if you give them a chance, and by that I mean you were talking about one and done and clearing the boards. Doncic, Irving, I get the feeling if Minnesota controls the glass, they win this series. But if they're giving Dallas 1, 2, a third chance on the offensive end, that could be big trouble.
Well, the thing when I look at this, and I think it's going to be a close series. I don't think it's going to be a sweep or 5 games. I think it was 6, 7 games in Minnesota's favor. But if there are close games, I think the one thing that you have to look at for Jason Kidd is he can go to 2 guys down the stretch of these close games, whether it's Doncic or Kyrie, and probably get himself a quality look at a basket or a great play for somebody else. And I think that gives them a slight advantage over Minnesota. They really have one closer. That's Anthony Edwards. I know Naz Reid played great in spots, and they got some contributions from Karl Anthony Towns. But we're talking about last 2 minutes, Chico, and it's a 2-point game, and it's a back and forth. Dallas has the extra closer in Kyrie, and I totally agree with you on Kyrie. One of the great stories this year, and this is, as much as we've killed Kyrie, everybody has in the past, because he's always lived by, there's more to life than me putting a ball through the rim. That's his famous quote. That's why he goes off and he gets involved in other stuff during a basketball season. And it drives coaches and GMs and fans nuts, whether it's Cleveland, whether it's Boston, whether it's Brooklyn. In Dallas, he has changed that. He is totally focused now, it looks like, getting that second ring. Why that is because he wants to, ask his way out of town if he helps them deliver another title or gets them close. Who knows? But you can't argue with what he's done here in his, first full year after the trade last season. He has been phenomenal, and he really gives Dallas that extra guy, and that's why they're going to be a tough out. They will be a tough out, and the other thing too, in the Oklahoma City series, they got unbelievable contributions from P.J. Washington, who's a Dallas kid, and Derek Jones Jr. These guys take advantage of the fact that when you've got Kyrie and Luka Doncic on the floor, there's so much attention for those guys with double teams and extra defenders and people shading to them. They get wide open looks, especially P.J. Washington from 3. He's a 35%, I think, career 31% this past year shooter in the regular season. He's up to 41% in the playoffs. He had huge games against Oklahoma City. You saw what Derek Jones Jr. did, who hardly scored in double figures the last 2 months of the season. In the playoffs, you can count on him for 15, 18 points. That's huge too, because you have to get it from the other guys. So it shapes up as a phenomenal, just a great series. This is the new blood in a lot of ways in terms of Minnesota. Luka Doncic, we'll see if he can get to his first finals. I'll tell you one thing. Both teams, this is going to be a war. Whoever emerges, they will not, if it's Boston in the East, nobody's scared of Boston. Either team's going to feel like, this is our year to win a title. First ever for Minnesota, and it would be Dallas's only their second in their history. So I'm sure these guys are raring to go because it's right there for the taking, the title. It's not like Boston is a real 64-win team.
Oh, we'll get to them. Yeah, we'll get to them in a second. One last thing on Dallas and Kyrie. I want to go back to that for a second. Are there whispers about, well, would Kyrie want out at the end, or is it just been,
No, but it goes back to, think about what was going on during the first round of the playoffs in the world. The campus unrest across America. The Mavericks are playing the Clippers in Los Angeles. All hell's breaking loose at UCLA, if you remember.
Yeah.
They had a city built, right? It's the whole Hamas thing, Israel, Gaza, all this stuff going on. This is the perfect time for Kyrie Irving in the past to say, hey, you know what? I got to get over to Westwood and support the UCLA students.
That's a great point.
I'm not kidding here. This is a thing he thinks about, and he never I'm surprised nobody ever asked him about it, because this is part of his track record. He likes to get involved in this stuff because for him, it's important that he helps solve the world's problems. That's the way he thinks about himself. I mean, we all know that. And for him to, like, I don't even know why nobody. I would have said to him, hey, what do you make of what's going on at UCLA? And why aren't you over there? Because this is right up your alley in terms of how you think about the world. And he's been all basketball. And that's great for the Mavericks. In terms of whispers about him leaving, there aren't any. But, we'll see what he feels. Does he really feel at home in Dallas? Does he really, like, he wants to stay here? We've always felt like, a lot of people, he wants to work his way back to LeBron for one more go, or maybe go to the Clippers, go to LA, go to a bigger market, a bigger basketball. Dallas is a good market. Don't get me wrong. It's a great market for sports. It ain't the Cowboys. It ain't the biggest thing. So we'll see how he feels about this after the season, what, in fact, he says or does. He's under contract. We know that. He's got a big extension. But you never know with Kyrie.
Mitch Lawrence joining us here on the Chico Bormann Show on the Big Play Sports Network. So great to have him along, and you joining as well. As we shift over to the East, you mentioned the Celtics. Let me start, though, with the Pacers, because look, anytime you lose a close game, I know it's a gut punch, but with everything at stake and the fact that you had that lead and you're on the road, you're feeling like this is huge. This is a huge win. Now all of a sudden you lose that game, and I know it only counts one, but it feels like it counts for two. It's almost like they need to win 5 times in this series because you had them. And I heard somebody today nationally say it reminded me of 2018 when J.R. Smith called the timeout near the end of regulation, didn't know the time, and then they had to go to overtime, and everybody's thinking we shouldn't even be here right now. That's probably what Indiana's feeling like today.
Yeah. In some ways, that's right. I think, though, look, they've blown big leads in the playoffs before, including game 1 against the Knicks.
Yeah.
First of all, they've had there's always a team or two in the playoffs, Chico, that has the great fortune when they go start the playoffs, they go up against their opponent's a wounded opponent, right? Milwaukee, Giannis, Lillard wasn't himself. Giannis wasn't around. Then they go against the Knicks, and the Knicks, Anunoby gets hurt. Brunson breaks his hand at the end of that game. They were going to win anyway because the Knicks couldn't defend him that day. But they've had the benefit of that little roll going. So you always had it like they're playing with house money. See, that's the thing that they can come back from pretty easily. They've had some bad losses in the playoffs, which you thought they could have won. And also, they're playing with house money here. All the pressure in the world is on the Celtics. Celtics don't win this series, Joe Mazzulla is going to get fired. That's guaranteed. That's the word around the league because Boston won 64 games, and Boston's road to the finals is about as easy as you can get. They started off against a bad number 8 Miami team with Jimmy Butler out and, whatever, not invested. As Pat Riley said, stop, shut your mouth talking about this stuff. But that was the number 8 seed. Then they played you guys, the 4 seed. And what happened in that series? Jared Allen didn't want to take a shot in his ribs to help the team. Donovan Mitchell didn't play the last 2 games. Cleveland was obviously compromised. They were the 4 seed, right? Now they get the 6 seed. I mean, are you kidding me? But listen, nobody's intimidated by the Celtics.
No.
And not Indiana. Nobody's scared of, everybody talks about their big 2, Brown and Tatum. Nobody's scared about playing those guys. You know what? You're a little intimidated, at least you were before Minnesota took care of them, about Jokic and Murray. We've seen that with tandems over the years in the NBA. Going back, listen, Kobe and Shaq, they were intimidating for other teams. So, for me, I think Indiana, this just rolls off their back. They self-destructed in the last 10 seconds with mind-boggling. They didn't call timeout to advance the ball. So the turnover was near the Celtic basket they were going to, where Jaylen Brown hit the shot. And of course, they didn't foul him because Siakam got there too late. And Siakam said, even though they were instructed to foul, he's starting to go into shooting motion. I can't give him a 4-point play. They did enough stuff to kill themselves down the stretch of that game where they knew they should have won. Now, you're right. The game that killed the Knicks in the Indiana series was game 3 because they had a chance to go up 3-0. That's the game where Nembhard took that crazy 30-footer, right? After he bobbled it, when Halliburton gave it up inexplicably. And that was the game they could have been up 3-0. Instead, the Knicks had to win an extra game, which they never could do. So that happens in the course of playoffs. I still think Indiana's in great shape because I'm not buying the Celtics as what I say is the old school 64-win team. They're a 64-win team that has flaws. We saw it last night, and they don't have Porzingis. And Indiana's deep, and they're talented, and they got guys who can score, and they have some size, and they've got gamers. So this is going to be – anybody thought this was going to be a sweep or 5-game series? I thought this could be 6 or 7 games, and I wouldn't be shocked if Indiana could pull this out because they're playing with house money, and they got the other team. Boston falls behind in this series, let's say. Let's say Indiana steals game 1 and then wins on their home court, takes a 2-1 lead. How's the pressure going to be on the Celtics after that?
Well, I go back to – this is what's interesting. I go back to beginning of the postseason I had you on, and, we're going through all the matchups, and I said, what's going to be the toughest thing for the Boston Celtics? And, we didn't even know all the injuries at that point that they were going to be able to, match up with. But You said the answer was the Boston Celtics, that the biggest issue they're going to have is themselves. And, okay, one game, they got the game, but you go back, it's so tough not to think about Jaylen Brown laying an egg and shooting, 17, 20% from 3 last year and Jason Tatum. And it just and you're right. If Porzingis isn't, a force in this series – and they're not able to or even, get him back. Let's say they do advance. If they don't have him against whoever comes out of the West, I wouldn't put my money on Boston right now. As crazy as that sounds, I don't think I'd put my money on Boston to win it all.
I think whoever comes out of the West will win if it's against Boston. The thing about Boston that's troubling, and it's been this way for a long time, is that if you get them in a close playoff game, now I know game 1 they won, but chances are, if you get them in a close game where they have to close out and execute offensively time after time, they can end up killing themselves a lot. Poor decision-making, hero ball, not remembering not working the ball around for a good shot, shooting up threes indiscriminately. They're famous for doing that. So let me tell you, this is a series that Indiana, I think, you talked about how's the resiliency going to be. If I were them, I'd be like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go here in game 2 because we know we can beat this team. We beat ourselves. That's what you take out of game 1 if you're Indiana. We beat ourselves. They didn't beat us.
All right. Final thing, and it's certainly of the utmost importance here in Cleveland. They are just a stone's throw away from us here at Burke Lakefront Airport, I'm sure, still having meetings at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse and deciding what are we going to do with our coach, JB Bickerstaff. They've got other decisions too, but first and foremost, it's that. I get the sense that as the days go by, it's becoming more what we've heard, and I'm sure you've heard this as well. Donovan Mitchell whispers, not anything throwing him under the bus, but it wasn't exactly supportive by any means. So it just sounds like as the days go by that JB is probably going to go. My issue with the fans here has always been, my God, he has done some good things. Let's not forget, even though last year was awful in the playoffs, even though they had, Mobley and Garland out for a time and they go on this winning spree in January. But ultimately, you know better than anyone covering the league, it's all about the postseason. So if he's not your guy, he's not your guy. Do you think the Cavs move on from him? And when you hear people say, well, you better be able to get somebody, if you're going to move him, you better be able to get somebody that can take him to the next level, who would that be, if indeed that's the case?
Well, I definitely think they're moving on. I heard this over the last, really even before the playoffs started, that he was basically done. And it would take like a major playoff run to save his job. Now, is it fair? That's just the way it is. Sometimes a team has to look at itself and say, can we do better with somebody else? Has he taken us as far as he can go as a coach? And I think they have other questions too, starting with Donovan Mitchell's whole future there, whether he's going to take the extension or whether they got to trade him. And that has come up. That's arisen. I look at coaches like, you want a list of candidates who I would look at. I'd start with Terry Stotts. I'd start there. He's a very good coach. He did well in Portland. Got to a conference finals with Dame and McCollum. If you want to have another guy, he's had a couple of jobs. He's done well, but he doesn't. He's kind of he's a brusque guy, but he's working on that whole department. Dave Yeager used to be in Memphis and Sacramento. He's a very good coach. For me, he's kind of a personal favorite. I think he does an outstanding job. I think those two guys would be an upgrade. I think Kenny Atkinson. Now, I don't know if Kenny Atkinson is waiting in Golden State to take over for Steve Kerr. He accepted the Charlotte job, what was it, 2 years ago, last year? And then he turned it down. He's another guy. I'll tell you what, as a coach, I'd hire either of the Van Gundy brothers, Stan or Jeff. People might say, oh, they're all both these guys can coach, and they'd be upgrades. That's the way I would look at it. So I'm looking at those guys there. Nate McMillan's another guy you could go with. So there are plenty of proven guys. I don't buy this whole thing about, first of all, they're not going to not fire JB Bickerstaff because they don't think there's somebody out there. They'll identify somebody out there. It's not going to be JJ Redick. Okay. He's going to go to the Lakers, but I would look at a guy like a Terry Stotts, and a guy like Terry Stotts, Donovan Mitchell knows, having played against Terry Stotts in Utah. Terry Stotts is a hell of an offensive coach. The problem was in Milwaukee as the number one assistant, he was not, he had problems. He was Adrian Griffin's top assistant. He didn't even start to see they had a falling out, right? He brought him in to coach offense. That's amazing.
Yeah, I was on with you when news broke that he was gone. That's right. He had just gotten on.
So I'm telling you, I don't know what they're going to do in Cleveland, but there's no, to me, I think the NBA community would be stunned if JB Bickerstaff were retained at this point.
Okay.
And one other thing I'll say.
Yeah.
I've seen reports that the Cleveland Cavaliers will not talk to the Lakers or other teams about trading Donovan Mitchell. Believe me, if Donovan Mitchell tells them I'm not signing an extension, they'll get on the phone with those other teams and get the best deal that they can, because there are going to be a lot of teams lined up for Donovan Mitchell. The Knicks, the Nets maybe, Pat Riley, Miami.
Rockets, I'm hearing. Rockets are all about the third overall.
Rockets, because Ime Udoka has a lot of clout there now, the coach, and he doesn't want to just do these minor steps to getting back to, they had a good year. He wants to get a veteran, big-time player in there to get into that playoff, forget the play-ins, jump right into the playoffs and get going. And the job they've done there, he's got the ear of the owner and the general manager. He's holding a lot of sway. So, yes, Houston will be another team. But I would, what Cleveland can talk about, we're not going to trade with so-and-so. They'll open it up to everybody, and they're going to get a tremendous deal for Donovan Mitchell. By the way, he's got a little Joel Embiid in him. What do I mean by that? Never gets past the second round. His second round record, 4-12 in the 3 times he's been in the second round. And I know you'll tell me, well, he wasn't favored. Listen, if you're the type of player a lot of people think he is, and he makes that kind of money, you got to go deep into second rounds and deeper into the playoffs than he's done. So we'll see where he ends up if he doesn't take the money from Cleveland.
Gut feeling, do you think that he does re-sign here in Cleveland?
No. There's too much smoke out there. I know he talks about being happy. He says all the right things.
Right.
No, I think he's ready to move on. And I think he's always had New York in his mind. but I think he would be receptive to going. Now, he doesn't have a no-trade clause like Bradley Beal, so he can't determine where he's going to go. But I think when he tells them, I'm not taking the extension, they'll start to act, and they're going to get a lot of – he will become one of the top – I mean, other than Paul George in this summer, Paul George could become free. A lot of people think he's going to Philadelphia, where, by the way, as a third option after Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, I'll take Paul George. I don't want him as a second option, definitely as the first. As a third option, I take him, right? I think Donovan Mitchell is going to draw a lot of suitors. Cleveland's going to they gave up a lot for him, they'll get a lot back.
All right, Eastern Conference winner, Western Conference winner, who is meeting for the NBA Finals? Mitch Lawrence.
I'll still pick Boston. I mean, it's going to be a dogfight. I'll still pick them. If not, then we're going to be talking, like I said, Joe Mazzulla will be out and they'll have to hire a coach. Western, I'm going to still go with Minnesota. So as I call it the Kevin Garnett, and I know he's still very much alive, but I call it the Kevin Garnett Memorial Series, a little Minnesota-Boston, right, where KG was stars for both franchises.
Who would he root for in that situation? Who would Kevin Garnett be pulling for in that situation?
Well, we had a big falling out with the guy who, who knows who owns the team? Is it Glenn Taylor? Is it Alex Rodriguez? Is it Mark Lurie? He will go with Boston because he has his relationship with Glenn Taylor is a little tough because I think he wanted at one point become a part owner of the team. I can't remember. They've had some problems. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
I don't really think he has a problem in Boston.
And they still love him. They still love him there in Boston.
Oh my God.
Certainly.
Fans up there love KG, the big ticket. So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting, if that's the finals. If it's Indiana against Minnesota, oh boy, the ratings. But I'll tell you, from the standpoint, Chico, of great stories and great intrigue, Kyrie Irving, remember how he left Boston.
Yeah.
Remember how he was hated by Bostonians, the Celtic fans. Can you imagine if it's Dallas, Boston finals, the absolute hate that will be up in Boston for Kyrie Irving? Because they take everything personally up there. You know that.
Yeah, and I want to hear him. Heck, we took it personally here as well. Heck, I want to hear him respond to, like you brought up a great point. If someone were to bring that up, would Kyrie bite, like a question about, like you said, in L.A. about, what the protest, or would he just say, you know what, I'm focused on basketball? Like, I guess that would be the great test for him.
If they happen to advance, get by Minnesota, and it's Boston standing there, that will be a big storyline. I don't know how he's going to answer it.
Yeah.
But you know what? If you're a reporter, you're not doing your job unless you say, Kyrie, you had a lot of, your run in Boston was not, you promised to resign there. You promised, one day I want my name up and my number up in the banner. Then you did everything to get yourself out of there. And you're going to be killed by the Boston fans. What's your message to Boston fans?
We need you back in the media room, Mitch.
He's got to say something.
We need you back in the media room. We need you back in there asking those tough questions.
Changed world. It's a change. Everybody's there just to ask nice questions and not worry about their access. And everybody's now a promoter. Nobody wants to ask. What Chuck Daly, I was going to say, ask the tough questions. Chuck Daly, the old great coach. When somebody once said to him, Chuck, hate to do it, but I ask you a tough question. He said, fella, there are no tough questions, only tough answers. And I'll leave you on that.
Mitch, you are the best. We appreciate your time as always. I'm sure we'll catch up with you again during the NBA Finals.
Have a happy Memorial Day weekend, my man. Thanks, Chico. All the best to you and your guys.
Thank you, bud. Appreciate it. He is certainly one of our favorites, no doubt. Mitch Lawrence, longtime NBA columnist, SiriusXM NBA Radio, joining us talking about the Eastern and Western Conference Finals. Also, his thoughts on the Cavaliers. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We got a few thoughts on the Cavaliers as well, and also wrap it up with some Guardians talk, who are on a roll, gunning for their 6th in a row today. And yes, speaking of OTAs, it's a pretty big deal here in Cleveland as well. We'll talk about that going on over in Berea. Back with more of the Chico Bormann Show right here on the Big Play Sports Network. All righty, welcome back. Chico Bormann Show here on the Big Play Sports Network, and brain is in overload right now. I mean, so much basketball to get to, not only just Western and Eastern Conference Finals right in our own backyard. You heard Mitch Lawrence, very good stuff and very opinionated, as he always is. We like him that way. He thinks JB is gone. Quite frankly, I think JB is gone as well. As the hours continue to build and we go into another day, I've heard people say it's imminent. What does imminent mean? Does that mean a day? Does that mean 2? Does that mean 4 a week? I don't think they want to stretch this out for very long. I think he's gone. Bohm, you weigh in. Do you think JB is out as well?
Chico, it just feels inevitable to me. Like, I don't know. It seems like he's already gone past the point of return, and he didn't do anything to salvage his job whatsoever. Even though you saw a strong final battle, the guys fought tough without Donovan, without Jared Allen in the fold. That's not enough to see a little bit of fight and scrap in a game that you get eliminated.
And before anyone says, oh, Chico's backtracking, I'm not. My biggest thing after last year was, first of all, any of you that said he should have been fired for last year was ridiculous. And any of you that try to tell me that he didn't do great things this year. But you had to wait. I always said we have to wait until the postseason because we don't know. And here's the telling part to me. Donovan Mitchell is not the type. Some superstars don't give a damn, and they'll throw their coach under the bus. We won't name names, but they'll throw their coach under the bus. They'll throw players under the bus. They don't care. Donovan Mitchell, in a roundabout way, Jared Allen, I've asked about it. I'm not saying that he has pointedly, but I've even said on this show, like, wow, he made a point to call out the Orlando coach. And how he said, wow, he really made a point to call him out by name, and it just seemed like maybe the Cavs just aren't that as prepared as they could be. And I know people are out there looking at me going, oh, well, yeah, sure, we told you that from day one. You didn't want to believe it. Well, you got to let things play out, okay? You got to let it play out. And now, if this is where it's at, now you can say after 2 playoff runs, all right, maybe he's not the guy. You couldn't after last year. You couldn't. So now if JB is out, you move on. I've heard people say, and I'm glad Mitch cleared it up, I think the idea that you don't, to me, saying that they won't have a clear-cut favorite, they don't have anybody to replace him, is kind of like saying back in the years when the Browns needed quarterbacks in the draft, well, if you can't, maybe they can't decide on a quarterback. Every GM, you're not in that position unless you can come to a decision, okay, on a quarterback in football or on a coach in basketball. They've thought this through. I think JB is gone. I wish him the best. I do think he did a great job while he was here, but now you got to get to the next level. Here's the other thing. Maybe the core's not going to remain the same. I mean, I know the obvious is Donovan Mitchell, does he sign or go? But, all 4 of these guys that we talk about, there's talks about, trades and Jared Allen. Jared Allen, by the way, has come under fire after the season ended for, man, why wouldn't this guy take a painkiller shot to numb the ribs and go out and play? Some teammates weren't too happy about it. Rumblings about that. So maybe these 4 guys that we talk about in the form of Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, that core, it happens. Yeah, they're great players individually, but they just can't mesh together. So it's not only just a JB thing, it's, well, Kobe has to not complete overhaul. It's not you're going back to square one. First of all, square one is you better make sure, the first priority is you got to make sure Donovan Mitchell resigns. Evan Mobley is going to be special. He proved that in that series. He's going to be, is only going to improve. Beyond that, that's where I think Kobe's got to start really thinking about, what works, what doesn't work. But JB, for all intents and purposes, I feel is most likely gone. And yeah, I can live with that. I'm not married to the idea that JB needs a 10-year contract. I just said, let it play out a little bit. So good stuff there from Mitch Lawrence. Again, East and Western Conference Finals. Can't wait for the West Finals tonight. I think Dallas and Minnesota is going to be outstanding. Minnesota's been a great story. And so that's going to be a good time. Speaking of good times, boom. How about what's going on over at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, at Progressive Field? Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, by the way, birds are flying into the windows. There's too many birds that are flying dead or ending up dead on the sidewalk, so they have to change the structure. So I applaud them for, being pro birds out there. But also, just down the road from them, right across the crossway there, Progressive Field, your Guardians, they are here in about 45 minutes getting ready to take the field. I'm going to head over there. Gunning for 6 in a row against old friend Francisco Lindor and the New York Mets. 32-17. Jose Ramirez is leading the league in RBIs. Stephen Kwan was leading the league in hitting when he went down with the injury. I mean, bullpen. Emmanuel Clase's ERA is like .37. It's denofloss. The guy's given up 1 earned run. One. Incredible stuff with the Guards. I love what's going on there. Can't wait to catch them tomorrow. Or, later on this afternoon. And, yes, OTAs as well. The Deshaun watch is on. Not just for – OTAs. It's a big deal. Like Mitch said, in Dallas and football towns, in Cleveland, we know is a football town. OTAs, they're stretching their calves. All right, let's get our I team there. We want to see how the calves look, not the team, the body part. How are their calves? Are there soft tissue? Is it stretched out? Does that portend to what could be a great season? All of that's on the line. Right now, it's all about Deshaun Watson, and he's not going to throw for the media today. Okay, I'll take him at his word. We'll wait till training camp, and then we'll start to get a little concerned if there's a need to be concerned. But right now, really nothing to see out in Berea. All right, we are out of here. Thanks to Mitch Lawrence, again, longtime NBA columnist and SiriusXM NBA radio. He was outstanding. Check us out on Twitter. You can also check us out on YouTube and, of course, go to the website as well. Michael Bone producing. Great job. I'm Mike Chico Bormann. For all of us here at Big Play, have a great week, everybody.